This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazoff.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazoff Gang. Tonight, CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood. What an honor and a privilege it is to be joined by Chris Gobbets, the Vice President of UnderstandingTheThreat.com. Chris, what an honor to have you on the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jamie. Glad to be here.
Great to have you here. Before we move forward, I would like to thank our guardian angel and one of the most wonderful women walking the planet Earth today, Amy Meck. And Chris, she's a wonderful friend of yours as well, correct?
Absolutely. She is. She's been a fantastic voice for truth out here.
Fantastic, and she's brought us together, so we're very grateful. Chris, before we get into some of the issues, of course, we have to begin with the horrific Islamic terror in Manchester. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's tragic and it's unfortunate that when these incidents happen, that's when we're having these discussions. We should be talking about the global jihad and the global Islamic movement every single day until they're defeated. And yet it takes something like this to where it's on the national stage, and yet this should be on the international stage every single day until we rid the earth of this evil.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that it seems like the Stockholm Syndrome actually escalates with every attack, because it's the same mantra over and over again from most leaders, our media. Oh, somebody knows a very nice Muslim neighbor. Not all Muslims are like this. This has nothing to do with Islam. And of course, we know that this is not anything to do with actually all Muslim people, because not all Muslims are devout Muslims, but it does have something to do with Islam. What do you think about all this denial that continues?
Well, you said it right. I mean, this has everything to do with Islam. And until we have that conversation here in America and in the West in general, we're just going to wake up, you know, every few days or every few weeks with these types of incidents that are happening. This is part of the strategy by the global Islamic movement, where you have a terror attack, and then you have groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, CARE, that will step in and set the narrative. And the narrative will be that this has nothing to do with Islam, and that Muslims are actually the biggest victims right now because of Islamophobia. And then you will have leaders across all over the West that will get up and tell everyone that we are that we all need to unite, and we all need to embrace our Muslim friends. And then they'll lecture us about the religion of peace. And to your point, not every Muslim or not every person that self-identifies as a Muslim wants to live under Sharia or even wants to follow Islam. The problem is 100% of our enemy in this war, whether it's Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, the Muslim Brotherhood, or nation states like Saudi Arabia and Iran, they all tell us that it is an obligation to wage jihad until the entire planet is subjugated under Sharia. And of course they would be telling us that because that comes right out of the Quran and the Sunnah. The traditions and sayings and teachings of Muhammad, their prophet. So until we acknowledge this has been a war that has been raging for 1,400 years. We're just seeing the latest iteration of that war in the last couple decades. And until we acknowledge it, this is the new reality.
Yeah, it seems like a horrific, sad, some kind of sick satire that just keeps going on, and it's a leftist belief system, and maybe we'll get to that in the program. Now, look, here's part of the tragedy, and you're the expert on this, because our leaders in the media, who are they really listening to? Well, it's organizations like CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood that are whispering into their ear day in and day out. And you happen to know something about CARE. Can you give our audience that doesn't know a little bit about your background, maybe mention some of your undercover work, and then we'll get into CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood?
Sure. So in 2008, I worked undercover with Hamas doing business as CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and I worked as an intern with them. And there was a book written about that experience called Muslim Mafia by Paul Sperry and my father, Dave Gobbets. And Look, it outlined everything that we learned, whether it was the Holy Land Foundation trial, which was the largest terrorism financing and Hamas trial in American history, or whether we learned it from my experience going undercover with CARE. The Muslim Brotherhood is waging civilization jihad. That's their words, that's their term, to destroy our civilization from within. And so when you talk about media response to an incident like Manchester, or San Bernardino, or Orlando, or Chattanooga, or 9/11, there's an orchestrated response. And I actually witnessed that firsthand working with CARE. They work closely with their media contacts in the mainstream media so that as soon as something like this happens, they're the ones setting the narrative. And if I can just get everyone to understand this aspect of the war, it is simply this, that we have got to stop waging this war as though it is just people that are killing people, shooting things, and blowing things up. That is barbaric, it is savage, it is evil, but that is not how we're going to lose this war. We crush the enemy when we face them on the battlefield. The way we're going to lose this war is in the information battle space. This is a war of narratives. And as long as we're not having a discussion about Islam being the problem, we will never defeat that ideology. And that is what groups like CARE are working with the hard left Marxist socialist groups in the media that are more than happy to work with the Muslim Brotherhood or the Islamic movement, because they share the same goal, which is simply this, to tear down American society, tear down our system, and rebuild it in their utopian worldview that they have. So the leftists, you know this, Jamie, more than anyone, the leftists, their worldview is this Marxist utopian society that after they have their revolution, that's the world they want to create. Yeah. And the Islamic movement wants to create a global caliphate under Sharia. But in the meantime, they will work together to tear down America, because they know once they get the U.S. out of the way, there's nothing stopping them.
Absolutely. Now, Chris, I know everything we're discussing here is deadly serious, but if you don't mind, I want to just touch a little bit more on the personal story here of you infiltrating CARE, because a lot of people would be interested in this. I remember I read the book, brilliant, brave book, exposed so many things, but to the best of my memory, you had grown a beard, you were pretending you were a Muslim. Can you tell us how that went?
Sure. So, yeah, I had a much better beard back then. Look, I went into mosque. I converted to Islam at Dar al-Hijra Mosque, which is the mosque in Northern Virginia. Prior to me getting there, the imam at Dar al-Hijra was Anwar al-Awlaki. We all know him. He was the imam that the Washington Post and NPR said was the new face of moderate Islam, until he popped up in Yemen one day as an al-Qaeda leader. That's where I converted to Islam, at Dar al-Hijra in Northern Virginia. The imam that actually walked me through my conversion experience was a man by the name of Sheikh Shaker el-Sayed, who was the former president of the Muslim American Society, which is an overt Muslim Brotherhood group. But yeah, Jamie, I prayed with these guys. I prayed with groups like the International Institute of Islamic Thought, which was a Muslim Brotherhood group. Prayed side by side with Ibrahim Hooper, Nihad Awad at CARE. Got to meet Andre Carson, and was at the Capitol building when Keith Ellison was leading prayers. So I lived this. I lived this in mosques. I used to go to mosques on behalf of CARE and hand out literature. So I lived this day in and day out, Monday through Friday. Took some weekends off, but Monday through Friday for 6 months straight. So when I talk about Islam and when I talk about Sharia, that is my experience from going to mosques all over the country. And one thing I noticed was Islam is Islam. And that's not my words. Those are the Islamic scholars. Whether you're in Atlanta or you're in Northern Virginia, or you're reading literature out of Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, it's all the same Islam, and they'll be the first to tell you that.
Chris, thank you, Chris. Aside from the public face of CARE, because you were behind closed doors, can you just share one story or anecdote of conversations or things that were being said behind closed doors that our audience should know?
Well, for one thing, they should know that Ibrahim Hooper specifically said, though, if I had a nickel for every time I heard those right wingers while I was in there, to go to your point of about him working with leftist media, I mean, just absolutely despised anybody that was on the right side of the aisle. Um, they also had a training program. I mean, we're talking about a horrific terror attack in Manchester. Well, CARE has an actual training program where they take Muslims from their communities, train them on how to respond to terrorist attacks and anything in the media that's negative about Islam, to spin the narrative back into something positive about Islam and how to inject Islamophobia into the conversation. So
Yeah.
they're incredibly organized, and they're at this day in and day out.
Chris, you are, I think it would be an underestimation to say, quite a brave person, because maybe this is not something you want to maybe get into, but I'm sure that you feared for your life to some extent, or to a large extent, when you finally got out.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. You know, when I did this in my 20s, I'll be completely honest. I was just young, and I was in my 20s, and I was more than happy to serve my country. I mean, we have men and women overseas right now that are getting shot at to defend this country. From my perspective, the least that I could do is go into a mosque and pretend to be a Muslim. Um, Now, where I'm at right now is I know that I'm doing everything for Jesus, and I'm doing everything for the Lord and for God, and I know that as long as I do the right thing and I'm a good Christian, that His will be done in all things. So I can put any fear and anxiety aside. I'm not worried about that at all. What I'm
Right.
worried about is doing the right thing and protecting this country. And I know there are patriots all over the country that would be willing to do the same thing.
Just a sec, Chris. No, absolutely. I could bet that you are, in terms of your personal bravery and perhaps putting faith into the Lord. But what I was also getting to is that there have obviously been threats, and through their eyes, I don't know what's worse, a person that's a real apostate, or somebody that pretended that they became Muslim and then became an apostate.
Um, well, no doubt. I mean, look, the threat is real. The threat is there. We all know that under for what I never met the obligations from my perspective of Islamic law of actually converting to Islam, even though I posed as a Muslim convert, but I didn't actually believe it in my heart.
Right.
That being said, from their perspective, this is a jihad. And if they're willing to blow up children in Manchester, then of course they're willing to go after somebody like myself. That being said, it's not going to stop me from doing the right thing.
Thank you, Chris. Have you ever run into some of these individuals since?
Yeah, I have it, but it's been public venues. So I was at the state house in Oklahoma, and the state house in Texas, state capitol houses, where I've run into them. I've run into them in public events. I, it goes back to that idea, Jamie, of this being a narrative war.
Right.
They want to put off a different look publicly, and so if anything, from a security standpoint, going public with the story and with Muslim Mafia was actually a safer thing to do from that perspective, because the last thing they want to do is bring any attention to this.
Chris, look, before we go, we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 here. Look, Hillary represented, I think, a nightmare and more of a Muslim Brotherhood takeover. Huma Abedin whispering into her ear while she's president. That's a nightmare scenario. With Trump, we have more hope. He has the courage to name at least radical Islam. He has people like Bannon and Gorka and admirable individuals around him, but there's still a problem. Can you talk a little bit about the resistance within the Trump administration and within the government in general?
Sure. Look, drain the swamp is not a hashtag on Twitter. This is a real phenomenon going on right now. My understanding and my instinct on this is, from everything that I know and the context that I have, that President Trump is fully aware, but the establishment Republicans are fighting him tooth and nail, and they would be the first ones. We see it with the travel ban. We see it with immigration. if he were to actually come out right now and say the problem is Islam and we're going to deal with this, it would be the Republicans that would fight him just as much as the left. So we want to encourage him, the people that we have his back, that we support him, and as long as he's doing the right thing, we're going to continue to support him. But yeah, this would have been a nightmare if Hillary would have won, an absolute nightmare.
Chris, before we go, tell our viewers about understandingthethreat.com, and to all of our viewers that want to get behind you and support you, where they can go and what they can do.
Sure. So if you go to our website at understandingthethreat.com, the main thing that we want you to do is sign up for our newsletter. We need your help. We need more people involved in this effort. You can find me on Twitter at CareVGobbets, and you can follow us at UTT_USA on Twitter. But we need your help. Social media, again, this is a narrative war. We need your help on social media. Share our articles on our website. You can actually buy books on our website store, but get involved somehow. We need you in this fight.
Chris Gobbets, thank you so much for everything you've done for the country and for freedom, and we wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you, Jamie, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Chris. All of the viewers of the Glazov Gang, go to understandingthethreat.com, subscribe to everything you can on there, and tell all your friends and neighbors. Please remember, we're a fan-generated program. If you like what we do, please go to jamieglazoff.com to support the show. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. We'll see you soon. Good night.